You walk into meetings where others somehow steer every discussion their way, while your brilliant ideas get dismissed or ignored entirely. Every conversation feels like a chess match you're losing before you even realize the game has begun. Watching colleagues manipulate outcomes while you struggle to even get your voice heard. I am Niccolò Machiavelli, and for over 500 years, rulers and leaders have used my principles to shape the fate of nations through the power of strategic conversation. What I discovered about controlling dialogue will transform how you navigate every interaction, giving you the ability to guide any conversation toward your desired outcome before others understand what's happening. The same techniques that influenced princes and shaped political destinies can give you mastery over boardroom discussions, negotiations, and social exchanges in today's world. But first, like this video, subscribe for more timeless wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready for conversational supremacy. I was born into the chaos of Renaissance Florence in 1469, when words could elevate you to power or send you to the scaffold. My father, Bernardo, was a lawyer who understood that in our world, the pen truly was mightier than the sword, not because it was gentler, but because it could strike with precision where blades could not reach. I remember sitting in the shadows of our modest home, listening as my father received visitors who spoke in careful whispers about the Medici banking empire, the papal politics, and the shifting alliances that determined whether Florence would prosper or burn. These men did not come to my father for his sword arm. They came for his ability to craft words that could change minds, broker peace, or justify war. At 14, I witnessed my first lesson in conversational warfare. Lorenzo de' Medici himself visited our home, not in his magnificent robes, but dressed simply, almost humbly. I watched from the doorway as this man who commanded the loyalty of thousands sat across from my father like a supplicant. But within minutes of their conversation beginning, I realized I was witnessing a master at work. Lorenzo never demanded anything. He never threatened. Instead, he painted pictures with his words, visions of Florence's future glory, of my father's potential role in that glory, and of the terrible consequences that would befall all of Florence if certain political mistakes were made. By the end of their hour together, my father was not merely agreeing to Lorenzo's requests, he was volunteering to do more than what was asked. That night, I asked my father how Lorenzo had so completely captured his will. "Son," he said, "Lorenzo never tried to control me. He made me want to control myself in the direction he desired. The greatest conversational power is making others believe your goals are their own." This became my obsession. I began to study every conversation I encountered with the intensity of a military strategist studying battlefield tactics. I watched merchants in the marketplace, noting how the successful ones made customers feel clever for choosing their goods. I observed priests during sermons, seeing how they made congregants feel personally chosen by God, while simultaneously feeling guilty enough to increase their donations. In the taverns, where young men gathered to discuss politics and philosophy, I practiced what I was learning. I discovered that the loudest voice rarely won the argument. It was the one who could make others feel heard, while subtly redirecting their passion toward his own conclusions. I learned to ask questions that seemed innocent, but forced others to examine their own assumptions until they arrived at my preferred answers. By my 20s, I had developed what I now recognize as my fundamental principle. Every conversation is a negotiation, and every negotiation is warfare conducted by peaceful means. The weapons are not swords, but stories, not shields, but strategic silences, not cavalry charges, but carefully crafted questions that outflank your opponent's defenses. When I entered government service as a diplomat, these lessons served me well. I was sent to negotiate with kings and cardinals, with merchants and mercenaries, with allies who might become enemies, and enemies who might become allies. Each conversation was a chess match, where the stakes were measured not in captured pieces, but in captured minds. My awakening was complete when I realized that conversation was not merely a tool for achieving political goals. It was the mechanism by which all human cooperation and competition took place. Master conversation, and you master the fundamental force that shapes societies, builds empires, and determines the fate of individuals. This is why I must share these techniques with you. In your modern world, you face the same essential challenge I faced in Renaissance Italy: how to navigate a complex social and professional landscape where your success depends not on your individual brilliance, but on your ability to inspire, influence, and occasionally intimidate others through the strategic use of words. The most dangerous weapon in any conversation is not the brilliant retort or the devastating argument. It is silence wielded with surgical precision. I learned this truth during one of the most perilous negotiations of my diplomatic career, when I sat across from Cesare Borgia, the most feared man in Italy. Borgia had summoned me to discuss Florence's military support for his campaigns. He was known for his explosive temper and his tendency to resolve disagreements with poison or the blade. As I entered his chambers, I could see he expected me to arrive with desperate pleas and immediate concessions, as most diplomats did when facing his reputation. Instead, I sat down and said nothing. The silence stretched between us like a taut rope. Borgia began to speak, outlining his demands, his threats, his promises. With each passing moment of my continued silence, I watched his confidence shift to curiosity, then to unease. He began to elaborate on points he had already made, to justify positions he had initially presented as non-negotiable, to offer explanations for policies he had never bothered explaining to anyone. By remaining silent, I had forced him to negotiate with himself. After 20 minutes of his monologue, when he finally demanded that I respond, I had gathered more intelligence about his true position, his genuine concerns, and his actual limitations than any amount of questioning could have revealed. He had told me which of his demands were flexible, which of his threats were bluffs, and which of his allies were unreliable. "Your reputation precedes you, my lord," I finally said. "I came here to listen to wisdom." This simple response, delivered after strategic silence, transformed me from a supplicant to an equal in his mind. This encounter taught me the 3 fundamental principles of strategic silence that have served me in every important conversation since first. Silence forces others to fill the void with information. Human beings are psychologically uncomfortable with conversational vacuums. When you refuse to speak, others will reveal far more than they intended, often including their true motivations, their genuine concerns, and their actual negotiating positions. The person who speaks first after a strategic pause is usually the person who has less power in the conversation. Second, silence gives you time to observe and analyze. While others are talking, you can study their body language, assess their emotional state, and identify their conversational patterns. You can notice which topics make them defensive, which questions make them uncomfortable, and which suggestions excite them. This observational advantage becomes crucial intelligence for the remainder of your interaction. Third, silence communicates strength and confidence. In a world where most people feel compelled to fill every pause with words you're comfort with, silence signals that you are not desperate for approval, not anxious about the outcome, and not intimidated by their presence. This perception of strength often causes others to offer more than they originally intended, simply to earn your approval or response. I have used strategic silence in negotiations with kings who expected immediate deference, in meetings with merchants who tried to pressure me into quick decisions, and in social gatherings where others competed for attention through constant chatter. In each case, Silence gave me a decisive advantage. The key is knowing when and how long to remain silent. Too brief, and you merely seem pause-prone. Too long, and you appear rude or disengaged. The optimal silence lasts just long enough to create slight discomfort, usually between 5 and 15 seconds in most conversations. Though in high-stakes negotiations, it can extend much longer. Your silence must be purposeful, not empty. Use those moments to maintain steady eye contact, to project calm confidence, and to genuinely listen to what others reveal about themselves. Before you utter a single word in any important conversation, you must become a master detective, gathering intelligence about the hidden dynamics that will determine your success or failure. I learned this lesson in the labyrinthine corridors of the papal court, where speaking without first understanding the complete political landscape could cost you everything. I remember entering a crucial meeting with Pope Alexander VI and several cardinals, ostensibly to discuss trade agreements between Florence and the Papal States. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward diplomatic negotiation, but my training in observation revealed a far more complex reality. The Pope sat at the head of the table, but I noticed that Cardinal della Rovere positioned himself where he could see everyone's faces while keeping his own expressions hidden. Cardinal Borgia kept glancing toward a particular door, suggesting he expected someone else to arrive. The papal secretary took notes on some comments, but not others, indicating which topics were considered truly sensitive. Most revealing was what I heard before the official conversation began. In those precious minutes of social pleasantries, I learned that della Rovere was concerned about French influence in Italian politics, that Borgia was facing pressure from his family's financial interests, and that the Pope was more worried about maintaining his political alliances than about the economic details of our trade discussions. This intelligence completely changed my approach. Instead of leading with Florence's economic needs, I began by addressing the political stability that our trade relationship would provide. Instead of negotiating with the Pope as the sole decision-maker, I made sure my proposals appealed to each cardinal's specific concerns. My method for reading any room before speaking involves 5 systematic observations. First, identify the real power structure. The person with the official title is not always the person with actual influence. Watch where others look when making important points. This reveals who they consider the true decision. Notice who speaks first on controversial topics, and who others wait to hear from before expressing their own opinions. Second, map the existing relationships and alliances. Observe seating arrangements, eye contact patterns, and who supports or challenges whom. Look for signs of tension, familiarity, or deference between participants. Understanding these dynamics helps you avoid accidentally threatening important alliances or walking into ongoing conflicts. Third, assess the emotional atmosphere. Is this a routine meeting where people are relaxed and open to new ideas? Is there underlying tension that makes everyone defensive? Are people excited about possibilities or worried about problems? The emotional context determines which conversational approaches will be welcomed and which will be rejected. Fourth, identify individual motivations and concerns. Listen carefully to what people say before the formal discussion begins. Pay attention to what topics they avoid, what subjects make them animated, and what questions they ask. Each person enters the conversation with specific hopes, fears, and objectives that you can address if you recognize them. Fifth, recognize the unspoken rules and expectations. Every group has its own conversational culture. Some value direct confrontation, while others prefer subtle suggestion. Some expect formal presentations, while others favor casual dialogue. Violating these expectations can undermine your credibility. Before you even present your ideas, the most crucial skill is learning to observe while appearing. fully engaged in social pleasantries, I developed the ability to conduct meaningful reconnaissance during seemingly casual conversations, gathering intelligence while others thought we were simply being polite. Your modern workplace operates with the same hidden dynamics that governed Renaissance courts. The person who speaks without first understanding these invisible forces will find their best ideas dismissed, their strongest arguments deflected, and their most reasonable requests denied, not because their proposals lack merit, but because they failed to align with the room's hidden reality. Information is the currency of influence, and like any valuable currency, its power lies not in spending it all at once, but in the strategic timing of each transaction. I discovered this principle during my most delicate diplomatic mission, negotiating with King Louis XII of France, while secretly maintaining Florence's independence. The French king summoned me to his court, expecting complete transparency about Florence's military capabilities, political alliances, and economic resources. He assumed that, as a representative of a smaller power, I would lay all our cards on the table in hopes of gaining his favor. Instead, I arrived with a carefully planned strategy of controlled revelation that would serve Florence's interests, while appearing to satisfy his demands for information. During our first meeting, I revealed just enough about Florence's concerns regarding Venice to establish credibility, but I withheld our specific intelligence about Venetian military movements. This partial truth made the king hungry for more information while positioning me as someone with valuable secrets. By the second meeting, he was asking more questions than he was demanding answers. I shared details about our banking relationships that made Florence appear financially stable, but I omitted information about our credit limitations that might have made us seem vulnerable to economic pressure. I described our defensive capabilities in terms that suggested strength, while carefully avoiding any details that would help him assess our actual vulnerabilities. Most importantly, I revealed our genuine desire for alliance with France, but I withheld the urgency of our need for protection from other Italian city-states. This made our partnership appear to be a choice rather than a necessity, which dramatically increased our negotiating position. The principle of controlled revelation operates on three fundamental psychological truths about human nature. First, people value most what they must work to obtain. Information freely given is often dismissed as common knowledge or propaganda. Information that must be carefully extracted feels like valuable intelligence. By making the king work for each piece of information, I increased its perceived value and his appreciation for my cooperation. Second, partial knowledge creates curiosity and dependency. When you reveal enough to demonstrate your value but withhold enough to maintain mystery, others become invested in continuing the relationship to learn more. The king found himself scheduling additional meetings not because he needed to give me orders, but because he wanted to hear what else I might reveal. Third, the sequence of revelation controls the direction of the conversation. By choosing which information to share first, second, and third, you guide others toward the conclusions you want them to reach. I revealed information about Florence's strengths before discussing our challenges, creating a context where our limitations appeared manageable rather than fatal. My technique involves categorizing information into 4 levels before any important conversation. Public information can be shared freely to build credibility. Valuable information should be revealed strategically to create perceived value. Sensitive information must be shared only when it serves your purposes. Secret information should never be revealed unless absolutely necessary for success. The key is making your revelations feel like natural responses to their questions rather than prepared presentations. When someone feels they are skillfully extracting information from you, they trust that information more than anything you volunteer. This requires careful preparation. You must anticipate their questions and plan your responses to guide the conversation toward your objectives. In your modern context, This principle applies whether you are discussing your qualifications in a job interview, negotiating a business deal, or even navigating personal relationships. The person who reveals everything immediately loses all conversational leverage and often appears either desperate or naive. The most elegant way to control a conversation is to make others believe they are leading it, while you guide them toward your desired destination. This is accomplished not through statements, but through questions, the invisible reins that direct without seeming to constrain. I mastered this art during my investigation of the Pazzi conspiracy, when the wrong approach to interrogation could have meant civil war for Florence. When evidence surfaced that certain Florentine families might be plotting against the Medici, I was tasked with uncovering the truth without creating panic or prompting the conspirators to accelerate their plans. Direct accusations would have either driven the plot underground or triggered immediate violence. Instead, I developed a technique of strategic questioning that led suspects to reveal themselves while believing they were demonstrating their innocence. Rhett approached Francesco Pazzi not as an interrogator, but as a concerned friend seeking his wisdom about the political tensions affecting Florence. "Francesco," I began, "you understand these noble families better than anyone. If someone were planning to move against the Medici, how do you think they would go about it?" This question accomplished three things simultaneously. It positioned him as an expert, it made him analyze conspiratorial methods, and it encouraged him to reveal his own thinking process. His response was illuminating. Instead of dismissing the possibility, he provided detailed analysis of how such a plot might unfold, which families would need to be involved, and what external support would be necessary. More revealing was his intimate knowledge of Medici, security procedures, and his unprompted suggestions about their vulnerabilities. I followed with questions that seemed to seek his advice, but actually mapped his network. Who else shares your concerns about political stability? Which families do you think we should watch most carefully? If you were organizing opposition, which supporters would be most crucial to recruit? Each question felt like a request for his expertise, but his answers revealed his connections, his capabilities, and his knowledge of information he should not have possessed unless he was actively involved in planning. The power of redirecting through questions lies in four fundamental techniques. First, the expertise positioning question makes others eager to demonstrate their knowledge while revealing their thinking. Instead of asking, "What are you planning?" ask, "Given your experience, how would someone in your position approach this challenge?" This transforms interrogation into consultation. Second, the hypothetical scenario question allows people to reveal their actual intentions while maintaining plausible deniability. If you were in charge of this project, what would your first priority be? Often reveals what their first priority actually is. Third, the advice-seeking question makes others feel powerful while providing you with intelligence about their values, capabilities, and connections. Who would you recommend I speak with about? This reveals their network. What approach do you think would be most effective? Reveals their methodology. Fourth, the assumption testing question gently challenges their position while forcing them to defend or clarify their stance. It seems like you believe this approach would work because ... allows them to correct your assumption while revealing their actual reasoning. The key is sequencing your questions to build a complete picture while maintaining the illusion that you are learning from them rather than investigating them. Each question should feel like a natural follow-up to their previous answer, creating a conversational flow that feels organic rather than structured. This technique works because it satisfies people's desire to feel important and knowledgeable, while giving you complete control over the direction and scope of the discussion. In your modern context, these same principles apply whether you are conducting job interviews, managing team discussions, or navigating complex negotiations. People do not buy what you are selling, they buy what they believe they want. And your task is to show them how your proposal fulfills their existing desires. I call this the mirror principle, because your words must reflect their deepest motivations back to them in a way that makes your objectives appear to be the natural fulfillment of their own goals. I learned this lesson while negotiating with 3 very different personalities during a critical trade dispute that threatened Florence's economic stability. Each man held essential influence over the outcome, but they were motivated by completely different desires that seemed incompatible with each other. Cardinal Soderini was driven by his vision of moral leadership and his desire to be remembered as a protector of Christian values. When I met with him, I did not discuss economic benefits or political advantages. Instead, I spoke about how resolving this trade dispute would prevent the poverty and social unrest that leads Christian families into desperation and sin. I positioned our preferred solution as his opportunity to demonstrate moral leadership. By protecting the innocent from economic hardship, merchant Giovanni Tornabuone was motivated by profit and his reputation among fellow businessmen. With him, I spoke entirely in terms of market opportunities, competitive advantages, and the respect he would earn from other merchants for his shrewd negotiation. I presented identical proposals as chances for him to demonstrate his superior business acumen and increase his wealth. Ambassador Piero Soderini sought recognition and influence within diplomatic circles. Our conversations focused on how his handling of this dispute would enhance his reputation among foreign diplomats and position him as an essential figure in future international negotiations. The same trade proposals became vehicles for his diplomatic ambitions. Each man ultimately supported identical policies, but each believed he was pursuing his own distinct objectives. This was not deception, it was recognition that the same outcome can legitimately serve multiple, different purposes simultaneously. The mirror principle requires deep understanding of what drives each person you seek to influence. I developed a systematic approach to identifying these core motivations through careful observation and strategic questioning. Some people are motivated by recognition and status. They want to be seen as important, successful, or influential. With these individuals, frame your proposals in terms of the respect and admiration they will earn from others. Show them how supporting your position will enhance their reputation and demonstrate their superior judgment. Others are driven by security and stability. They fear loss, uncertainty, or chaos. Present your ideas as protection against risks they already worry about. Help them see how your proposal provides safety and predictability in an uncertain world. Many are motivated by achievement and competence. They want to prove their capabilities and accomplish meaningful goals. Frame your suggestions as challenges that will allow them to demonstrate their skills and achieve something significant. Some seek connection and belonging. They want to be part of something larger than themselves. Position your proposals as opportunities to join important movements or contribute to causes they value. The key is listening for the language people use to describe their hopes and concerns. When someone says, "I want to make sure we don't fall behind our competitors," they are revealing a security motivation. When they say, "I want to be known as someone who gets results," they are expressing achievement motivation. Once you understand their primary drive, you craft your message to make your desired outcome appear to be the perfect vehicle for achieving what they already want. This is not manipulation, it is recognition that most good ideas can legitimately serve multiple purposes and benefit different people in different ways. The mistake most people make is assuming everyone shares their own motivations. They present ideas in terms of what excites them personally, then wonder why others seem indifferent to obviously good proposals. The same words that produce triumph when spoken at the right moment will create disaster when delivered too early or too late. Timing in conversation is like timing in warfare. Strike too soon and you reveal your position before you can exploit it. Strike too late and the opportunity vanishes forever. I learned this during the siege of Pisa, when a single message delivered at precisely the right moment changed the course of the entire campaign. Our Florentine forces had been struggling against Pisan defenses for months, with mounting casualties and declining morale. The military commanders were beginning to discuss retreat, while the political leadership in Florence was growing impatient. With the expense and duration of the siege, I had been gathering intelligence about internal divisions within Pisa, and I discovered that their leading families were split between those who wanted to negotiate surrender and those who insisted on fighting to the death. But this information was useless until the right moment presented itself. That moment came when Pisan food supplies reached critical levels and their lookouts reported seeing what appeared to be French reinforcements approaching from the north. In reality, these were Florentine supply wagons disguised to look like foreign military support. But the Pisans could not know this. I chose this exact moment when they were hungry, divided, and uncertain about new threats, to send my message to the moderate faction within Pisa. The letter offered generous terms for surrender, emphasized Florence's respect for Pisan dignity, and mentioned our awareness of their difficult position, without specifically referencing their food shortage. Had I sent this same message a week earlier, when their supplies were adequate, it would have been rejected as a sign of Florentine weakness. Had I waited another week, the moderate faction would have been overwhelmed by the hardliners preparing for a final desperate stand. But delivered at that precise moment of maximum uncertainty, it provided the moderate faction with exactly the justification they needed to push for negotiations. Understanding conversational timing requires recognizing the rhythms that govern human decision-making and emotional states. The first rhythm is emotional receptivity. People cycle through periods when they are open to new ideas and periods when they are defensive or distracted. Watch for signs of openness, relaxed body language, genuine questions, forward-leaning posture before presenting important proposals. Avoid crucial conversations when people show signs of stress, fatigue, or preoccupation. The second rhythm is decision-making pressure. There are moments when people feel urgent need to resolve issues, and moments when they prefer to avoid decisions. The key is recognizing when someone feels pressure to act versus when they have the luxury of delay. Your timing should align with their sense of urgency. The third rhythm is competitive dynamics. In group settings, there are moments when people are competing for attention and moments when they are collaborating toward shared goals. The same suggestion that gets dismissed during competitive phases can be enthusiastically adopted during collaborative phases. The fourth rhythm is information saturation. People have limited capacity for processing new information. The first point you make receives fresh attention, but subsequent points compete with mental fatigue. Important messages should be delivered when people have mental energy to consider them properly. I developed techniques for creating optimal timing rather than simply waiting for it. Sometimes you can increase receptivity by addressing someone's immediate concerns before presenting your main proposal. Sometimes you can create urgency by highlighting time sets of opportunities or risks. The most advanced timing technique is orchestrating the conversation so that others feel compelled to ask for exactly what you want to tell them. When people request information rather than receiving it unsolicited, they are psychologically committed to considering it seriously. Your words carry maximum power when they arrive precisely when your audience is most ready to hear them. In any conversation involving more than two people, victory belongs not to the person with the best argument, but to the one who builds the strongest coalition of support. I mastered this principle during the complex negotiations that established the League of Cambrai, where I had to unite parties with conflicting interests against a common opponent while secretly protecting Florence's independence. The challenge was formidable. Convince the French, Spanish, and Papal representatives to coordinate their efforts against Venice, while ensuring that their success would not threaten Florence. Each party had different objectives, different concerns, and different reasons for distrusting the others. My task was to become the architect of their unity while remaining outside their alliance. I began by identifying potential allies within each delegation, individuals whose personal interests could be aligned with my broader objectives even if their official positions seemed incompatible. Among the French delegation, I found Ambassador d'Amboise, who was concerned about being overshadowed by more senior diplomats and eager to demonstrate his own diplomatic skills. Among the Spanish, there was Consul Vega, who wanted to prove that Spain could be a reliable partner despite recent political upheavals. The Papal representative, Cardinal Grimani, sought to position himself as a peacemaker who could unify Christian powers. Instead of trying to convince all three delegations simultaneously, I worked to create a network of individual relationships that would eventually coalesce into collective support. I met privately with d'Amboise and spoke about how his leadership could bridge the gap between French ambitions and Spanish concerns. I suggested that his diplomatic skills were uniquely suited to achieving what the senior ambassadors had failed to accomplish through traditional methods. With Vega, I discussed how Spanish participation in this alliance could demonstrate Spain's reliability to skeptical European powers. I positioned him as someone who could prove that Spain's recent political changes had actually strengthened, rather than weakened, their capacity for international cooperation. To Cardinal Grimani, I presented the alliance as his opportunity to demonstrate Papal leadership in unifying Christian powers against a common threat. I suggested that his mediation could create a model for future cooperation that would enhance the Church's influence in international affairs. Each conversation was designed to make the individual feel like a co-architect of the alliance, rather than a reluctant participant. I shared just enough of my discussions with the others to make each person feel included in an important inner circle, while withholding enough details to maintain each relationship's sense of special intimacy. The breakthrough came when I orchestrated a moment where all three could present their unified proposal to their respective superiors as a triumph of their own diplomatic skill. Each man believed he had convinced the others to support his nation's position, when in reality they had all agreed to support the framework I had carefully constructed through individual conversations. This technique requires understanding the psychology of coalition building. People are more committed to decisions they believe they helped create than to decisions imposed on them by others. By making each potential ally feel like a contributor to the strategy rather than a target of persuasion, you transform them from neutral parties into invested advocates. The key is identifying what each person needs to feel successful and valuable within the group. Some people need to feel heard and respected. Others need to feel influential and important. Some need to feel that their expertise is valued, while others need to feel that their concerns are taken seriously. Once you understand these individual needs, you can craft your approach to satisfy multiple people simultaneously. This often requires presenting the same proposal in different terms to different individuals, emphasizing different benefits and addressing different concerns while maintaining underlying consistency. The most powerful coalitions are built not through grand speeches to the entire group, but through a series of individual conversations that create a network of mutual support. Each person becomes your advocate with others, creating multiple channels of influence rather than relying on direct persuasion alone. The ultimate conversational power lies in mastering the delicate balance between being loved and being feared, and affection that makes others want to please you while maintaining an edge that ensures they never take you for granted. This dual mastery requires switching seamlessly between personas within the same conversation. and I learned its necessity through my dealings with the most dangerous man I ever encountered. Cesare Borgia commanded through pure intimidation, believing that fear alone was sufficient to maintain control. This approach worked in the short term, but created enemies who waited for opportunities to destroy him. In contrast, many diplomats I observed relied solely on charm and goodwill, which made them beloved but powerless when serious conflicts arose. During our extended negotiations over Florence's military obligations, I developed a technique that combined both approaches within individual conversations. I would begin our meetings with genuine warmth, inquiring about his health, complimenting his recent successes, sharing amusing stories from my travels. This established rapport and made him comfortable in my presence. But when discussions turned to substantive matters where our interests conflicted, I would introduce a subtle shift in my demeanor. My voice would remain pleasant, but my words would carry unmistakable implications about consequences. I hope, for everyone's sake, that we can find a solution that avoids the complications that would arise from any misunderstanding between our states, I might say, smiling warmly while making it clear that Florence had options beyond submission. The key was making these transitions feel natural rather than manipulative. People needed to experience both aspects of my personality as authentic, not as calculated performances. This required genuinely appreciating Borgia's strengths while authentically representing Florence's resolve. I discovered that the most effective balance involves being warm in manner but firm in principle. You can express genuine liking for someone while making it clear that your affection will not compromise your position on important matters. This combination communicates both respect and strength. The charm component requires several specific techniques. First, demonstrate genuine interest in others as individuals, not just as obstacles to your objectives. Ask about their concerns, remember personal details from previous conversations, and acknowledge their expertise in areas where they excel. This creates authentic connections that make people want to maintain positive relationships with you. Second, find opportunities to offer help or support that costs you little but provides them with real value. This creates positive associations with your presence and makes others look forward to your involvement in their activities. Third, use humor appropriately to diffuse tension and create shared experiences. People remember how you made them feel, and laughter creates positive emotional memories that influence future interactions. The fear component is more subtle and must never appear as intimidation or threats. Instead, it involves demonstrating competence and resolve in ways that make others respect your capabilities. When you speak with quiet confidence about serious matters, when you remain calm under pressure, when you ask penetrating questions that reveal your understanding of complex situations, you communicate strength without aggression. The most powerful fear is not fear of punishment, but fear of missing opportunities or losing respect. When people believe that disappointing you means losing access to your expertise, connections, or future cooperation, they become much more attentive to your concerns. The balance shifts depending on context and personality, with people who respond well to warmth, lead with charm while maintaining subtle firmness. With those who respect strength above all, lead with quiet confidence while showing enough warmth to avoid creating enemies. The ultimate goal is creating relationships where others genuinely like you personally while taking your positions seriously. Professionally, this combination produces the most durable influence because it satisfies both emotional and rational motivations simultaneously. When someone attacks you verbally in a conversation, your response in the next 30 seconds will determine whether you emerge stronger or weaker from the encounter. I learned this during one of the most hostile confrontations of my diplomatic career, when Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere accused me publicly of treachery against the Church, seeking to destroy my reputation and end my influence in PayPal politics. The accusation came during a formal gathering where silence would be interpreted as guilt, but defensive protests would make me appear weak and desperate. Della Rovere had chosen his moment carefully in front of witnesses who could spread word of my disgrace throughout Italy, but also in a setting where violent retaliation was impossible. Machiavelli, he declared with theatrical indignation, you speak of serving God while secretly negotiating with France against the Holy Father's interests. How do you answer this charge of betrayal? The room fell silent. Every eye focused on me, waiting to see whether I would crumble under this assault. I felt the familiar surge of anger that makes most people either retreat in confusion or lash out in rage, both responses that would have served Della Rovere's purposes perfectly. Instead, I smiled calmly and responded with what I now call the elevation counterattack. Your Eminence honors me by suggesting that my modest diplomatic efforts could significantly impact the great affairs of state. I am merely a servant of Florence, seeking to understand the wisdom of leaders like yourself who shape the destiny of nations. This response accomplished multiple objectives simultaneously. It acknowledged his status while subtly mocking his paranoia about my influence. It positioned me as humble while implying that his concerns about me were disproportionate. Most importantly, it forced him to either escalate his accusations, making him appear petty for attacking someone who claimed to be insignificant, or retreat from his position. Della Rovere found himself trapped. If he continued attacking me, he would appear to be bullying a minor diplomatic representative. If he backed down, he would lose the momentum of his assault. He chose a middle path that satisfied no one, mumbling something about the need for vigilance in dangerous times. Effective counterattacks operate on the principle of redirection rather than direct confrontation. When someone attacks you, they expect either submission or retaliation. By providing neither, you disrupt their script and regain control of the interaction. The first technique is the competence redirect, where you acknowledge their concern while demonstrating superior understanding of the situation. You raise an important point about timing, though I think the real challenge we face is ... This shows that you are not defensive while steering toward territory where you have stronger ground. The second is the higher purpose redirect, where you reframe the attack as a distraction from more important shared objectives. I understand your frustration, but our real focus should be on ... This makes the attacker appear petty for pursuing personal grievances when larger issues demand attention. The third is the alliance redirect, where you acknowledge their position while appealing to others in the group. John clearly has strong feelings about this approach. What do others think about the underlying question of this? Isolates the attacker while engaging more reasonable voices. The fourth is the expertise redirect, where you use their attack as an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge or capability they did not expect. That's exactly the kind of concern that led me to research ... This transforms their assault into a platform for showcasing your competence. The key is maintaining emotional composure while mentally categorizing the type of attack you face. Personal attacks require different responses than professional challenges. Attacks based on emotion need different handling than those based on substantive disagreements. Never respond immediately to a serious verbal attack. Take a moment to breathe, assess the attacker's motivation, and choose your response strategy. This pause also communicates confidence and control, suggesting that you are not rattled by their aggression. The most powerful conversations are not won in the moment they occur, but in the weeks and months that follow. When ideas you planted take root in others' minds and grow into convictions they believe they developed independently. I mastered this patient art during my campaign to convince the Florentine government to establish a citizen militia. Revolutionary concept that took 3 years of strategic conversations to achieve. The traditional approach would have been to present a formal proposal arguing for the military and political benefits of armed citizens. This would have triggered immediate opposition from those who profited from mercenary contracts, feared armed populism, or simply resisted change. Instead, I began planting seeds of doubt about our current system through casual observations and seemingly innocent questions. During social gatherings, I would mention reports from other Italian cities about mercenary unreliability. It's curious how Venice's hired soldiers seemed so reluctant to fight when their pay was delayed. I might remark, then change the subject before anyone could challenge or defend the point. These comments were designed not to convince, but to create mental files that would accumulate evidence over time. In formal meetings, I would ask questions that forced others to articulate the weaknesses of our current approach. What would happen to our defenses if our mercenary captains decided our enemies offered better terms? I never answered this question myself. Let others explore the implications and reach their own uncomfortable conclusions. Most importantly, I shared stories from classical history about citizen armies, not as arguments for change, but as fascinating examples of human courage and civic virtue. These stories created positive emotional associations with the concept of armed citizenship, while avoiding direct advocacy that would trigger resistance. After months of this preparation, when external threats made military reform urgent, I found that others were already predisposed to consider citizen militias as a viable solution. The idea felt familiar rather than foreign, practical rather than radical. When I finally presented formal proposals, they were received as logical extensions of concerns people had already been discussing, rather than revolutionary changes I was trying to impose. The psychology of long-term influence relies on several key principles. First, people are more committed to ideas they believe they discovered independently than to concepts others try to convince them to adopt. When you plant seeds and allow them to develop naturally, others experience the satisfaction of insight, rather than the resistance of persuasion. Second, repetition from multiple sources creates the impression of consensus and inevitability. When the same concern arises in different conversations with different people, it begins to feel like an important trend rather than one person's agenda. Third, emotional associations formed gradually are more durable than those created through dramatic presentations. Stories, examples, and casual observations create emotional context that influences how people react when they encounter related proposals. The technique requires patience and discipline. You must resist the temptation to accelerate the process by arguing more directly or frequently. Too much advocacy too quickly triggers defensive reactions and skepticism about your motives. Successful seed planting involves 3 phases. In the preparation phase, you introduce concepts indirectly through stories, questions, and observations that create familiarity without triggering resistance. In the development phase, you encourage others to explore the implications through discussions that feel like collaborative analysis rather than advocacy. In the harvest phase, you present formal proposals that feel like natural conclusions to conversations already in progress. The most sophisticated version involves planting multiple seeds simultaneously. Some will take root quickly, while others remain dormant until circumstances make them relevant. This creates a portfolio of influence that can be activated when opportunities arise. Your modern environment offers the same opportunities for long-term influence through patient conversation. Whether you seek to change organizational culture, influence career decisions, or shift personal relationships, the principles of strategic seed planting remain as powerful today as they were in Renaissance Italy. Knowing how to exit a conversation gracefully is as crucial as knowing how to enter it effectively, because your departure determines whether others remember you fondly or feel manipulated by your presence. I learned this during a treacherous negotiation with the Duke of Urbino, when continuing the discussion would have forced me to make commitments Florence could not honor. But ending it abruptly would have created a powerful enemy. The Duke had been pressing me for specific military guarantees that exceeded my authority to provide, while making it clear that my refusal would be interpreted as an insult to his honor. Traditional diplomatic protocols suggested I should either exceed my instructions or risk offending an important ally. Instead, I employed what I call the strategic withdrawer technique that preserved relationships while protecting my position. Your Grace, I said, the importance of these decisions demands that I consult with those in Florence who share your vision for our alliance. I want to ensure that any commitments I make reflect the full consideration that your proposals deserve. This statement accomplished several objectives. It acknowledged the significance of his requests, suggested that Florence took his position seriously, and created space for me to retreat without appearing to reject his ideas. I continued, perhaps we could arrange for me to return in 2 weeks with responses that do justice to the strategic thinking you've shared today. This would also give us both time to consider additional opportunities for cooperation that might emerge from these discussions. This created anticipation for future engagement while ending the current conversation on a forward-looking note. The Duke agreed readily, interpreting my response as evidence that his proposals would receive serious consideration in Florence. In reality, I had gained time to develop alternative approaches that would satisfy his core interests without compromising Florence's position. Effective conversation exits require 3 essential components: acknowledgement, anticipation, and appreciation. You must acknowledge the value of what has been discussed, create anticipation for future interaction, and express appreciation for the time and attention you have received. The first type of strategic exit is the consultation withdrawal, used when you need time to consider proposals or develop responses. This conversation has raised important questions that deserve careful thought. Let me reflect on what you've shared and return with ideas that match the quality of thinking you've brought to this discussion. The second is the expertise withdrawal, used when discussions move beyond your knowledge or authority. You've identified issues that would benefit from input beyond my current expertise. Let me involve colleagues who can contribute meaningfully to the sophisticated analysis this situation requires. The third is the opportunity withdrawal, used when you want to end discussions while maintaining future possibilities. I see several potential directions for moving forward that we haven't had time to explore fully. Perhaps we should schedule another conversation when we can give these opportunities the attention they deserve. The fourth is the priority withdrawal, used when other obligations provide natural ending points. I want to continue this discussion when I can give it my full attention, but I have commitments that require immediate attention. Can we find time later this week to explore these ideas further? The key is making your exit feel like a natural pause in an ongoing relationship rather than a termination of interest. Others should feel that you valued the conversation enough to want to continue it properly, rather than rush through important topics. Timing is crucial. Exit too early, and you appear disinterested or superficial. Exit too late, and you risk being trapped in discussions that serve others' interests better than your own. Watch for natural transition points where conversations could logically pause, and use those moments to suggest continuation rather than conclusion. Your departure should leave others feeling positive about the interaction and optimistic about future engagement, regardless of whether you actually intend to continue the relationship. Every person carries invisible vulnerabilities into every conversation, fears, insecurities, and blind spots that, when properly understood, become leverage, points for influence. I discovered this during my analysis of Pope Alexander VI, whose public image of supreme confidence masked deep anxieties that shaped every major decision of his papacy. Alexander projected absolute authority and divine certainty, intimidating diplomats and cardinals who approached him as if he were infallible. But careful observation revealed patterns that exposed his psychological foundations. He consistently avoided discussions about his legitimacy as pope, deflected questions about his family's reputation, and showed visible discomfort when conversations touched on his mortality or legacy. Most revealing was his reaction to any suggestion that his policies might be reversed by future popes. This seemingly small concern indicated a profound fear that his life's work lacked permanence of vulnerability that influenced everything from his political alliances to his artistic patronage. During our negotiations over Florence's tribute payments, I crafted my approach around this hidden weakness. Instead of arguing about the economic burden of his demands, I spoke about how future historians would remember his wisdom in balancing papal authority with Italian prosperity. I suggested that his approach to Florence would become a model for how enlightened popes could maintain church influence while supporting regional development. This reframing transformed our negotiation from a discussion about money into a conversation about his historical legacy. Suddenly, reasonable tribute levels became evidence of his statesmanship rather than concessions to Florentine pressure. He began suggesting modifications to his own demands, presenting them as refinements that would better demonstrate papal wisdom. Identifying conversational weaknesses requires systematic observation of what people avoid, what makes them defensive, and what topics generate emotional rather than rational responses. These vulnerabilities typically fall into predictable categories. Status. Insecurities reveal themselves when people overcompensate with displays of importance, interrupt others to assert dominance, or become defensive when their expertise is questioned. These individuals can be influenced by approaches that enhance their sense of status and recognition. Competence fears surface when people avoid taking responsibility for decisions, deflect blame to others, or provide excessive justification for their choices. They respond well to conversations that make them feel capable and valued for their judgment. Security anxieties appear when people focus excessively on potential risks, resist change even when beneficial, or seek constant reassurance about outcomes. They are most influenced by approaches that emphasize safety and predictability. Approval needs become obvious when people change their positions based on social feedback, avoid expressing unpopular opinions, or seek consensus even when inappropriate. They can be guided through approaches that make them feel accepted and appreciated. Legacy concerns manifest when people discuss how they will be remembered, worry about their lasting impact, or seek to associate themselves with important achievements. They respond to conversations that connect your proposals to their desired reputation. The key is patience in gathering intelligence before attempting influence. Watch for patterns across multiple interactions rather than drawing conclusions from single conversations. Notice what topics make people more animated, what questions they avoid answering directly, and what situations trigger their strongest emotional responses. Once you identify someone's primary vulnerability, the ethical approach is to address their underlying concern while achieving your objectives. This means showing them how supporting your position actually serves their deeper needs, rather than exploiting their fears for selfish purposes. The most effective technique is making others feel stronger rather than weaker. When you help people address their insecurities while achieving your goals, you create lasting influence based on gratitude rather than temporary compliance based on manipulation. Your approach should make others feel that you understand and respect their concerns, that you are helping them achieve what they value most, and that collaborating with you enhances rather than threatens their position. Every important conversation is a performance that requires the same careful preparation, character development, and dramatic awareness that Renaissance theatre demanded. I learned this truth when I was summoned to perform what amounted to a command performance before the French court, where my words would determine whether Florence remained independent or became a French vassal state. The challenge was not merely diplomatic, but theatrical. King Louis XII expected me to arrive as a supplicant, grateful for French protection and eager to submit to French authority. The assembled courtiers anticipated entertainment from watching a minor Italian diplomat humble himself before their sovereign. My actual goal, negotiating a partnership between equals, required completely rewriting their expectations through performance. I prepared by developing a character that would serve Florence's interests, the wise counselor who brought valuable intelligence and strategic insight that France needed for success in Italy. This character would be respectful but not servile, knowledgeable but not threatening, useful but not dependent. My costume supported this character, elegant enough to command respect, but not so magnificent as to suggest wealth that might threaten French interests. My props included carefully selected maps and documents that demonstrated Florence's strategic value without revealing our vulnerabilities. Most importantly, I scripted key moments of the performance. I prepared opening remarks that would establish my character immediately, anticipated likely challenges that would require dramatic responses, and developed closing statements that would leave the desired impression. When I entered the royal chamber, instead of immediately approaching the throne as protocol suggested, I paused to study a tapestry depicting French military victories. This created curiosity about my behavior while positioning me as someone who appreciated French achievements. When summoned forward, I commented knowledgeably about the strategic brilliance shown in the tapestry, immediately establishing my character as a military analyst rather than a simple messenger. Throughout our conversation, I maintained this character consistently. When the king tested my resolve with veiled threats, I responded with the calm confidence of someone who understood military realities rather than the anxiety of someone afraid of consequences. When courtiers attempted to diminish my status with subtle insults, I demonstrated the dignified amusement of someone secure in his own value. The performance succeeded because every element supported the same narrative. Florence offered France a valuable partnership that enhanced French interests while respecting French authority. Effective conversational performance requires 4 essential elements: character consistency, audience awareness, dramatic pacing, and strategic authenticity. Character consistency means maintaining the same persona throughout the interaction. If you begin as the helpful expert, you cannot shift to desperate supplicant without undermining your credibility. Choose your character based on your objectives and maintain it regardless of pressure or temptation to adopt other approaches. Audience awareness involves understanding not just what you want to communicate, but how your specific audience will interpret your performance. The same words and behaviors that establish authority with some groups will create resistance with others. Your performance must be calibrated to the expectations and values of those you seek to influence. Dramatic pacing means controlling the rhythm and intensity of your presentation. Important revelations should be timed for maximum impact, building tension before providing resolution. Moments of humor should relieve pressure without undermining your authority. Pauses should create anticipation rather than confusion. Strategic authenticity requires that your performance feel genuine even when it is carefully planned. The most effective theatrical characters are based on authentic aspects of your personality, amplified and focused for specific purposes. This allows you to perform with conviction while maintaining the psychological coherence that makes others trust your sincerity. Your preparation should include rehearsing key moments, anticipating likely challenges, and developing backup approaches for situations that deviate from your expectations. Like any skilled performer, you must be prepared to improvise while staying true to your character and objectives. Complex negotiations require systematic frameworks that ensure you maintain control while appearing to engage in natural dialogue. I developed my most sophisticated approach during the intricate trade negotiations that established Florence's commercial relationships with the Ottoman Empire, discussions that involved multiple parties, conflicting interests, and cultural barriers that could have destroyed any hope of agreement. The challenge was unprecedented. Convincing Turkish merchants to grant Florence preferred trading status, while satisfying Venetian concerns about competition, addressing papal objections to Christian-Muslim commerce, and ensuring that Florence gained more than we conceded. Traditional diplomatic approaches would have created a chaotic discussion where the strongest party imposed their will on everyone else. Instead, I created what I call the negotiation matrix, a structured approach that guides complex conversations toward mutually beneficial outcomes while ensuring your priorities are achieved. This system operates on 3 levels: strategic architecture, tactical progression, and psychological management. The strategic architecture begins with mapping all parties' true objectives, not just their stated positions. The Turks wanted reliable European trading partners and political recognition of Ottoman legitimacy. The Venetians needed assurance that new trade relationships would not threaten their existing profits. The papal representatives required face-saving arrangements that avoided appearance of endorsing infidel commerce. Florence sought economic opportunity and political independence. I designed a framework where each party could achieve their core objectives through different aspects of the same agreement. Turkish legitimacy would come through formal diplomatic recognition. Venetian profits would be protected through geographic trade divisions. Papal concerns would be addressed through charitable provisions that demonstrated Christian values. Florence would gain market access and autonomous decision-making authority. The tactical progression involved controlling the sequence of discussions to build momentum toward agreement rather than allowing debates to spiral into conflicts. I structured conversations so that areas of natural agreement were established before addressing contentious issues, creating psychological investment in successful outcomes before introducing difficult topics. We began with discussions of mutual benefits, increased prosperity, regional stability, cultural exchange that everyone could support enthusiastically. These early agreements created a collaborative atmosphere and established precedent for finding common ground. Only after this foundation was secure did we address specific terms that required careful balancing of competing interests. The psychological management component focused on making each party feel like winners rather than losers. This required careful attention to language, symbolism, and presentation that allowed everyone to return to their constituents with evidence of successful advocacy. Turkish representatives could report achieving recognition and respect from European powers. Venetian negotiators could demonstrate protection of established commercial interests. Papal diplomats could point to provisions that advanced Christian charitable objectives. Florentine officials could celebrate expanded trade opportunities and maintained independence. The negotiation matrix operates through 5 systematic phases that can be applied to any complex conversation involving multiple parties or competing objectives. The preparation phase involves mapping all stakeholders' true motivations, identifying potential areas of agreement, and designing frameworks that could serve multiple interests simultaneously. This requires extensive intelligence gathering and creative thinking about win-win possibilities. The foundation phase focuses on establishing shared principles and common objectives that everyone can endorse enthusiastically. These early agreements create psychological momentum and demonstrate that successful collaboration is possible. The architecture phase introduces systematic frameworks for addressing contentious issues. Rather than debating specific terms immediately, you establish processes and criteria that will guide future discussions. This makes complex negotiations feel manageable rather than overwhelming. The resolution phase applies the agreed frameworks to specific decisions, using the momentum and goodwill created in earlier phases to resolve difficult questions. By this point, all parties are invested in success and motivated to find acceptable compromises. The confirmation phase ensures that final agreements satisfy everyone's core needs while creating implementation mechanisms that maintain relationships. Beyond the immediate negotiation, the key insight is that structured approaches actually enhance rather than constrain creativity and relationship building, because they provide security that allows people to take risks and explore innovative solutions. The principles I developed in Renaissance Italy remain as powerful today as they were 5 centuries ago, because human psychology and the dynamics of influence have not changed. Only the settings where these eternal truths apply. Whether you navigate corporate boardrooms or family discussions, online meetings or social gatherings, the fundamental mechanisms of conversational control operate with identical effectiveness. Your modern workplace mirrors the political courts where I learned these techniques. Just as Florentine diplomats competed for influence with Venetian merchants and PayPal representatives, you compete for resources, recognition, and advancement with colleagues who have their own agendas and allegiances. The stakes may be career advancement rather than territorial control, but the conversational dynamics remain identical. Consider how strategic silence applies in your business meetings. When your manager asks for volunteers for a challenging project, the person who speaks first appears eager but potentially desperate. The person who waits strategically before offering thoughtful conditions appears confident and valuable. The same psychology that made Cesare Borgia reveal his negotiating position works on modern executives under quarterly pressure. The mirror principle transforms performance reviews and salary negotiations. Instead of arguing about what you deserve, based on your own priorities, reflect your supervisor's core concerns back to them. If they value team stability, position your contributions in terms of reduced turnover and improved collaboration. If they focus on measurable results, frame your value in terms of specific metrics that matter to their own evaluations. Reading the room before you speak proves essential in virtual meetings where traditional body language cues are limited. Pay attention to who speaks first on controversial topics, whose opinions others wait to hear before expressing their own views, and which subjects create awkward silences. The power dynamics that governed Renaissance courts operate identically in Zoom conferences. Controlled revelation becomes crucial when discussing your qualifications during job interviews. Rather than presenting your entire background immediately, share information strategically to create curiosity and demonstrate value. When interviewers must work to learn about your capabilities, they value that information more highly than anything you volunteer unprompted. The questioning techniques that exposed political conspiracies work perfectly for managing difficult colleagues or clients. Instead of confronting problematic behavior directly, ask questions that force others to examine their own actions. Help me understand how this approach serves our shared objectives, accomplishes more than your behavior is unacceptable. Building conversational coalitions applies whether you seek support for budget proposals or family vacation plans. Identify individuals whose personal interests align with your objectives. Work to satisfy their needs through private conversations. Then, orchestrate moments where they advocate for your position to the broader group. The balance of charm and fear translates into being professionally warm while maintaining clear boundaries. Show genuine interest in colleagues as individuals while demonstrating quiet competence that makes others respect your positions. This combination creates relationships where people want to maintain positive connections with you while taking your professional concerns seriously. Your personal relationships benefit equally from these principles. family discussions about significant decisions: where to live, how to spend money, how to handle challenges, respond to the same influence techniques that shaped international treaties. The key is adapting your approach to reflect love and mutual respect rather than political maneuvering. Social situations where you meet new people offer perfect opportunities to practice strategic conversation skills. Whether at networking events, dinner parties, or community gatherings, you can experiment with different personas, practice reading room dynamics, and develop your ability to build rapport quickly with diverse personalities. Even online interactions through social media, email, and digital platforms operate according to these eternal principles. The person who masters strategic timing, controlled revelation, and psychological insight will influence others, regardless of whether conversations occur face-to-face or through screens. The fundamental insight remains unchanged. Conversation is the mechanism through which all human cooperation and competition occurs. Master these techniques, and you master the essential skill that determines success in every area of modern life. As I reach the end of my teachings, I want you to understand the profound responsibility that comes with mastering these conversational techniques. You now possess knowledge that can transform relationships, advance careers, and influence outcomes in ways that will ripple through your life and the lives of others for years to come. The power I have shared with you is not a toy to be used carelessly, nor a weapon to be deployed without consideration of consequences. It is a tool of leadership that demands wisdom, integrity, and genuine concern for the welfare of those you influence. The greatest conversational masters understand that true power lies not in defeating others, but in creating outcomes that serve larger purposes while respecting human dignity. Throughout my life, I observed leaders who used these techniques to build lasting legacies of positive influence, and others who employed similar skills for selfish purposes that ultimately destroyed them. The difference was not in their conversational abilities, but in their fundamental character and long-term vision. Use strategic silence to create space for others to be heard, not just to gather intelligence for your own advantage. Employment, controlled revelation to build trust and understanding, not to manipulate others into serving your interests exclusively. Deploy questioning techniques to help people clarify their own thinking, not merely to trap them into positions they will later regret. The most profound legacy you can create is becoming someone others trust to have their best interests at heart, even when you disagree with their positions. When people know that conversations with you will be honest, respectful, and mutually beneficial, they will seek your counsel during their most important decisions. This kind of influence extends far beyond any single interaction. Remember that every conversation shapes not just immediate outcomes, but the kind of person you become. Each time you choose manipulation over genuine persuasion, you diminish your own character. Each time you prioritize short-term victories over long-term relationships, you reduce your future influence. The techniques I have taught you work best when employed by people with authentic integrity. Your conversational legacy will be measured not by how often you got your way, but by how often others felt better about themselves after speaking with you. The greatest influence comes from helping others achieve their own objectives while advancing causes larger than personal ambition. I challenge you to use these skills to become a leader who elevates every conversation, who makes others feel heard and valued, who finds solutions that serve multiple interests simultaneously. Become someone known for asking the right questions, for seeing possibilities others miss, for bringing out the best in people even during difficult discussions. The world needs more individuals who can navigate complex human dynamics with both effectiveness and ethics, who can influence outcomes while building rather than destroying relationships, who can achieve their objectives while helping others achieve theirs. Practice these techniques with patience and humility. Start with low-stakes conversations where mistakes will not create serious consequences. Observe how others respond to different approaches. Pay attention to what works and what backfires. Develop your own style that reflects your personality while incorporating these timeless principles. Most importantly, never stop learning. Human nature provides endless opportunities to refine your understanding of influence and persuasion. Each person you meet offers lessons about motivation, communication, and relationship building that can enhance your effectiveness. Your conversational mastery will become your most valuable professional and personal asset. Use it wisely, and it will open doors, create opportunities, and build relationships that enrich your entire life. Use it carelessly, and it will create enemies, destroy trust, and ultimately limit your potential. The choice is yours. You now possess the knowledge. How you employ it will determine not just your success, but your legacy as a human being who either contributed to or detracted from the quality of human discourse in your time. Go forward with wisdom, integrity, and the confidence that comes from understanding the eternal principles that govern all human interaction.